Classical conservatism, also known as traditionalist conservatism, is a political and social philosophy grounded in a reverence for tradition, cultural continuity, and the enduring structures that have governed human civilization for generations. It is not merely a nostalgic yearning for the past, but a philosophical orientation that regards inherited institutions, customs, and norms as time-tested embodiments of wisdom. According to this philosophy, the preservation of these structures is essential for maintaining societal stability, moral order, and a cohesive national identity. The origins of classical conservatism can be traced to a reaction against the ideological upheavals that emerged during the Enlightenment and the French Revolution. These movements emphasized abstract principles such as equality and liberty over practical governance rooted in historical experience. A fundamental tenet of classical conservatism is its deep respect for traditional institutions. These include the family, the church, the monarchy, and other cultural frameworks that have shaped human life over centuries. These institutions, conservatives argue, have evolved organically to meet the complex needs of human societies and should not be tampered with lightly. This cautious stance toward reform arises from a belief that rapid or radical change often leads to unforeseen consequences, destabilizing societies and undermining their moral foundations. Therefore, rather than viewing history as a chain of errors to be corrected, classical conservatives regard it as a storehouse of accumulated wisdom that informs present decisions. Classical conservatives view society not as a collection of isolated individuals but as an organic whole. This metaphor of society as a living organism underscores the interdependence of its various parts. Just as the well-being of a tree depends on the health of its roots, branches, and leaves, so too does the health of a society rely on the harmonious functioning of its institutions, communities, and traditions. This perspective leads to a skepticism toward ideologies that prioritize individual autonomy above communal responsibility or that seek to reshape society through government activism. For traditional conservatives, the role of government is not to engineer new ways of life but to safeguard the existing social order. This view also accounts for the emphasis classical conservatism places on practical reason over theoretical abstractions. Unlike political philosophies that prioritize universal principles or hypothetical models of justice, traditionalist conservatism values experience and precedent. It resists schemes that attempt to reorganize society from the ground up based on abstract notions of equality or freedom. Instead, it favors incremental change that is consistent with inherited traditions and tested by historical circumstance. This preference for the historical over the theoretical also manifests in a profound respect for customs, conventions, and cultural continuity. A central feature of classical conservatism is its grounding in religious faith and natural law. Many conservatives throughout history have adhered to high church Christianity or similar traditions that view moral principles as transcendent and divinely ordained. These beliefs provide a foundation for law, ethics, and public policy, infusing society with a sense of purpose and moral direction. The concept of natural law suggests that there are objective moral truths accessible through reason and tradition, and that these truths should guide both personal conduct and political arrangements. This framework often translates into a preference for moral legislation that upholds family values, communal obligations, and public decency. Hierarchy and authority are also regarded as natural features of human society. Classical conservatives believe that leadership and structured authority are necessary for the maintenance of order and the achievement of justice. Far from being oppressive, hierarchies are seen as protective and stabilizing when tempered by duty and responsibility. In this view, legitimate authority is earned through service and tradition, and it functions to mediate social conflicts and preserve communal well-being. While individual rights are respected, they are not seen as absolute but rather as balanced by obligations to others and to society at large. In contrast to classical conservatism, classical liberalism emerged as a political philosophy rooted in the Enlightenment values of reason, liberty, and individual autonomy. Where conservatism emphasizes continuity and social order, classical liberalism champions the inherent dignity of the individual and the idea that government exists to protect natural rights. The central claim of classical liberalism is that individuals possess rights by virtue of their humanity and that these rights exist independently of the state. Consequently, the primary role of government is to safeguard these rights, not to grant or regulate them. Classical liberals advocate for limited government, based on the belief that the state is prone to overreach and must be constrained by law and constitution. Government power is seen as a necessary evil, justified only insofar as it defends life, liberty, and property. The mechanisms of representative democracy, constitutional checks and balances, and the rule of law are all designed to prevent tyranny and ensure accountability. This framework seeks to create a free society in which individuals can pursue their own interests, form voluntary associations, and engage in economic exchange without undue interference. Economic freedom is a cornerstone of classical liberalism. Inspired by thinkers such as John Locke and Adam Smith, classical liberals argue that free markets, driven by competition and voluntary exchange, create wealth and innovation while respecting individual autonomy. They oppose heavy taxation, tariffs, and government monopolies, seeing such interventions as distortions of the natural economic order. The liberal emphasis on free trade and minimal regulation was particularly influential during the 19th century, a period often associated with rising living standards, increased political participation, and expanding global commerce. Despite these differences, classical conservatism and classical liberalism share certain commonalities, particularly their support for economic liberty and suspicion of concentrated political power. However, they diverge sharply in their attitudes toward social norms and the role of tradition. Classical liberals are more inclined to embrace social change and question inherited authority, while conservatives emphasize continuity and social cohesion. In this sense, liberalism values individual rights and innovation, whereas conservatism values stability and moral guidance. A further ideological distinction emerges when comparing classical liberalism with radicalism. Although both share a commitment to civil liberties and opposition to autocratic rule, they differ markedly in their views on the scope of government and the extent of social reform. Classical liberals, as noted earlier, advocate for a limited role of government, emphasizing personal responsibility, market solutions, and gradual progress. In contrast, radicals support a more active government that can intervene in the economy and society to promote justice, equality, and democratic participation. Radicals often push for electoral reforms aimed at expanding suffrage and making political systems more inclusive. While classical liberals in the early modern period supported representative government, they were often cautious about extending the vote to the broader population, fearing that mass democracy might undermine property rights or lead to mob rule. Radicals, on the other hand, viewed broad enfranchisement as essential for genuine democracy and social justice. They were more likely to support initiatives such as secret ballots, redistricting to eliminate corruption, and the inclusion of working-class voices in the political process. In economic policy, classical liberals adhere to laissez-faire principles, emphasizing minimal government involvement. Radicals believe that unchecked capitalism could lead to exploitation, inequality, and social unrest. As a result, they often advocated for regulatory oversight, labor protections, and public services aimed at addressing social needs. This willingness to use government as a tool for reform marked a significant departure from classical liberal orthodoxy. Socially, radicals were more willing to challenge established norms and institutions. Where classical liberals preferred evolutionary change, radicals sought more immediate and transformative reforms. These included efforts to address poverty, extend education, reform the penal system, and protect the rights of marginalized groups. Though these initiatives varied by context and historical moment, the radical impulse was generally one of pushing the boundaries of what was politically possible in the name of progress and equity. The philosophical roots of radicalism are broader and more eclectic than those of classical liberalism. While the latter draws primarily from Enlightenment thinkers who emphasized individual autonomy and natural rights, radicalism was influenced by a range of progressive, romantic, and socialist ideas. It was less concerned with preserving existing structures and more focused on reimagining society to reflect ideals of justice, equality, and community. In this respect, radicalism functioned as both a continuation of liberal principles and a critique of their limitations. The 18th and 19th centuries were especially rich in ideological experimentation and evolution. Classical liberalism established the groundwork for modern representative government, rule of law, and market economies. It emphasized personal freedom, voluntary association, and a restrained role for the state. Classical conservatism responded to the upheavals of the era by emphasizing tradition, social order, and moral responsibility. It defended institutions such as the monarchy, the church, and the family, arguing that these were essential to the health of the nation. Radicalism, meanwhile, emerged from a desire to go further than either conservatism or liberalism in achieving justice and equality. It was often born out of social movements, workers' organizations, and intellectual circles seeking to democratize power and redistribute resources. The tensions among these three ideologies continue to shape political debates to this day. Discussions about the role of government, the legitimacy of tradition, the boundaries of individual liberty, and the demands of social justice all reflect the enduring influence of classical conservatism, liberalism, and radicalism. Each provides a distinct framework for understanding human society, the nature of authority, and the path to a good and just life. Though none of these ideologies offers a final or complete answer, their interplay helps to sustain the pluralism and dynamism of political life in modern democracies.